Tonight we have Dafna Tachover with us. We're so honored to have you, Dafna. She's the director of 5G Wireless Harms Project. That's with the Children's Health Defense, which is a nonprofit organization that's chaired by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And they are dedicated to eliminating the epidemic of chronic sickness in children from environmental toxins. And of course, EMF is a huge toxin. Dafna is also the founder of We Are the Evidence. That's an advocacy organization for the protection of the rights of the many adults and children who've been injured by wireless technology radiation. And Dafna has quite a story of what she's survived and come through stronger on the other side. Dafna is an attorney in New York and in Israel, and she's also got a technology background from her service as a telecom and computers officer in the Israeli Defense Forces. So don't mess with Dafna. In addition to her advocacy efforts on the federal, state, and municipal levels, Dafna has led a few landmark cases. In 2012, she initiated and led a Supreme Court case in Israel to replace the use of Wi-Fi in schools with safer wired networks. And this case led to the very first limitations on Wi-Fi use in schools worldwide. And then in 2020, under her direction, the Children's Health Defense filed a historic case against the FCC, challenging its health guidelines regarding wireless radiation. And in February of this year, Children's Health Defense filed another case against the FCC. It's against this OTARD rule. And I'm sure she's going to tell us all about that. So welcome, Dafna.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Val and Ben and everyone. And I just want to start in saying, I mean, all of those issues are really overwhelming. Every time we think we are on top of one issue, they come up with another law and another deployment, and it can be very, very scary and frustrating. However, we do see some success on some issues, and it really depends on the grassroots whether or not we're going to be successful. So while we do have these cases in court right now, these cases take time, and so we need to stop the deployment through the grassroots efforts. And I completely agree with everything Ben and Doug and Val and Libby said. We need to do the groundwork. There's no way around it. You cannot wait for us to win this case. You need to do the grassroots effort, go home to home, talk to your neighbor, educate them, and keep these out of communities. As Val said, we right now have two cases against the FCC. Both are in the federal court in DC, in the appellate court, and both are somewhat interconnected. The first case, as mentioned, is a case regarding the guideline case. It basically challenging the FCC decision not to review its 1996 obsolete and false guidelines. And that case is run together with the Environmental Health Trust. We're right now waiting for a court decision. We expect that we're going to get a decision within the next, I mean, it can be any day now and probably within 3 months. A decision in this case is important for the OTARD case. And so we do hope to get a decision within the time frame. If we're going to have a favorable decision, that will help the OTARD case. If we're not going to have a favorable decision in this case, it's not necessarily going to harm the OTARD case. Depends what the court will say as to why it rejects our claim. There is a chance that even if the court will reject our case, the reason will be that the FCC met what the law requires from it in regard to what they should or should not do when they review their decisions. So we are hopeful, nevertheless, that the decision will be favorable. We had a good hearing on January 25th. One judge says that he's inclined to rule against the FCC. Another judge was pretty aggressive towards the FCC, saying that it seems to her that the guidelines are not relevant for the current wireless infrastructure. In regard to OTARD, the case against the OTARD rule, we filed it on February 26 this year. The rule got into effect on March 29th. So we did try to stop the rule from going into effect. And on March 18, we filed a case with the court, a motion for an emergency injunction. Unfortunately, a motion was rejected. We knew that most likely it will be rejected. Most emergency motions are being rejected by the courts. It's very, very high, very, very difficult to get such, it's very difficult to get a court to grant this kind of injunction. And therefore, we do not think that the fact that the court rejected our motion for emergency injunction as indication as to our chances to win this case. Of course, if the court would have granted the injunction, that would be really good news. But again, the fact that we didn't receive that injunction does not mean that we do not have a good case. We do believe that legally we have a good case. However, you never know what the court's going to rule. So we are cautiously optimistic, both in regards to the guideline case, as well as to the OTARD case. Now, I do want, and I know all these technical issues and different antennas, and it's pretty complicated. And so I do want to explain a few things regarding OTARD, in addition to what was explained here. So OTARD, as Val started the conversation, is a rule that means over-the-air reception devices. It's a rule that was enacted to regulate mainly satellite antennas. And it means it regards infrastructure that is called point-to-point infrastructure. So you have maybe a cell tower and a dish that communicate directly. You may have a satellite antenna that communicate directly with the satellite. So this is what fixed wireless devices are. As was said before, the FCC decided to use now this law also to regulate transmitting devices, not only devices. So if until now a person, let's say who lives in a rural area, cannot get cell phone reception, cannot get, they don't have cables or fiber optic to get internet, needs to get faster internet, they can install either a dish on their home or a fixed wireless antenna to basically receive signal from a faraway cell tower and then connect that with a wire into a router into the house, and that's how they get internet. So now what the OTARD rule allows is, in addition to that receiving device that they have on the roof that directly connects to the cell tower, now they will be allowed to install another antenna that will transmit that signal all over the neighborhood. And these are not small powered antenna. They may look small, but they're going to be very powerful. And according to the submission of these companies to the docket of the FCC in this issue, we expect these antennas to reach 3 miles radius. So I put here a few examples of OTARD antennas. So if you see it in the middle column, the top image, that will be an old OTARD antenna that is only receiving and transmitting directly. The new antennas will have 2 antennas on the roofs. As you can see here, different antenna. There'll be the dish that received and transmit directly, but there'll also be another antenna that transmits the signal to the neighborhood, like you see on both right columns and in the middle columns on the bottom. Those are examples of how an OTARD-enabled antennas would look like on people's roof. And there are different shapes, different forms, but that is the idea. And again, some of these antennas may look small, but they're actually extremely powerful. Furthermore, there's literally no limitation in regard to the power that these antennas can emit. The only limitation in the OTARD rule is that these antennas cannot be bigger than 1 meter diameter, which means about 3 feet. And actually, these antennas, and that's how we call them in our submissions, are base stations antenna, and they will be allowed to put more than 1 antenna. And what this rules does is essentially making people wireless companies. And one of the arguments we're going to raise in our companies is that you cannot allow people to put transmitting antennas in the neighborhoods because that makes them into wireless operators, which is not allowed unless you have a permit to be a wireless operator. Now, there's a lot of reason why they enacted this law, but the implications are pretty devastating. When it comes to the OTARD rule, what it does a few draconian things. As I said, first, it allows installation of antennas in your neighborhood. As was mentioned before, there is no permit required, which means that even the regular wireless companies would want now to start and use the OTARD rule to deploy the small cells. There's no permit required, no notice to neighbors. All zoning, state, and some even federal rules are preempted, including homeowner association agreements and deed restrictions. So let's say you live in a homeowner association, and your homeowner association has various rules as to the installations of these antennas. All of those are now void. They cannot stop those antennas. Nobody needs permission anymore. It's literally the wireless Wild West. And we know that a lot of these companies now, for example, are targeting subdivisions because they are perfect environment for such antennas, because they can put an antenna on someone's roof. And because of the proximity of the houses, that signal will be, provided to all the other houses, and going to be very attractive way for the residents of that neighborhoods to get internet. If you have any restriction on your deed, that is void as well. That is no longer relevant. So there's no way really to protect your environment from being exposed to wireless. Nobody can preclude those antennas. We already know that some of the bigger wireless companies like T-Mobile and AT&T are basically now starting fixed wireless companies so that they can basically start and install their 5G antennas on people's home instead of going to the municipality and ask for application, submit an application, get permit, pay for permit. So it's a whole long process. They now just have to go to people's home, sign a contract, pay them $1,000, and that is done. So this is a draconian law that is going to enable the wireless Wild West. Thankfully, all of these actions actually give us really good legal grounds to object or to challenge this law. One of the major issues here is the violations of due process laws, because essentially now there's no way in which we can challenge those antennas because there's no application, no process. There's even no way to submit lawsuits against installations of antennas because it was preempted by the Telecommunication Act. Literally, people have nothing they can do to stop this antenna, and that is a constitutional violation of our due process rights. So we think that probably the strongest argument we have is the due process issue. We also made a focus of our lawsuit the people who have been affected by this radiation already, because for these people, if their neighbor are going to install an antenna, they're not going to know about it, not going to get notice about it. They cannot go and object it, against it and ask for accommodations under various disabilities laws. The way they're going to learn it, and there's one affidavit we filed to the court of a family that has a child that gets seizures from this radiation, and for that family, the way they'll discover that their neighbor put this antenna is by finding maybe their child one day on the floor with a seizure and maybe dead. So we have a good case. The case will take time. Our first submission is due on June 23rd. That's the main brief in the case is going to be filed on June 23rd. After that, the FCC has 2 months to file its reply, and that is going to be on August 23rd. Then we are going to have 3 weeks to respond to the FCC reply. That means mid-September. We have a few other submissions later on regarding evidence and other administrative issues, but basically that is done. That will be all the case. We're probably going to have a hearing probably within 2 months of those submissions, and then we'll have a court decision. So from the beginning of the case to the end, it's probably 1 year. So again, 1 year is a lot of time, especially for this installation. Those companies can do massive installations until then. And therefore, we're really depending now on the grassroots to stop the deployment and put a resistance on the ground against the OTARD rule. That's it, I guess, unless there's questions.
Thank you so much, Dafna. Yeah, we'll definitely be doing a Q&A at the end. Thank you so much for providing us the legal landscape on this. Just to reiterate.
Can I say one more thing? Sorry, I forgot to
Sure,
mention
go
one
ahead.
thing.
Yeah.
Sorry. So one tool that we found that can be very useful to you in your grassroots effort, there is a really good website, and I think I sent you a link before this event. It's called Broadband Now. And if you put your zip code, you will get all the internet and wireless companies that operates in your area. And on the bottom of the page that you're going to get when you do the search, you're going to see all the companies and which type of companies they are. And it will tell you if these companies are fixed wireless company. And why is this helpful? Because if you know which fixed wireless companies work in your area, then you can warn your neighbors. If you can tell them, listen, if you're getting communication for a company called Starry, please be wary that this is a fixed wireless antenna that they're trying to install in your house. So I think if you know which companies are operating in your area, that will be helpful to your efforts to educate others.